Okay, so when I had you guys write down things that could help you be more successful on your benchmarks, one of the things that continually popped up was that when I lecture, maybe I go a little bit too fast, and you're not able to get everything down like you need it, or you can't understand what I'm saying because you're so busy writing. And so we're going to pilot a new method of instructional delivery. We're going to take the next 3 weeks in as we progress to the end of the semester, and we're gonna try this. And so what will happen is I will do video lectures. And in class, instead of you listening to me live, you will utilize your Chromebooks and you will utilize headphones, and you will be taking the notes off of my video lectures. Now, the theory behind this is that it will give you more time to engage with the information. You can do it at your own speed. Sometimes I go a little bit fast. You can pause the lecture. You can go back. You can repeat things. And so it gives you a little bit of control in regards to how quickly we do the lecture. Now, you will be required to take the notes. It is going to be a requirement, and I will actually grade your notes to see that you have done them. And so today we're going to try this out. And so we're going to begin here in class. You're going to have the class period to listen to the lecture, take your notes, and then Wednesday I will do a check on your notes to ensure that you've done them. And if you have, that's a 100 for a participation grade. If you haven't, that's a 0. So I'm giving you time to do it. I'm giving you time to do it according to your own speeds, your own needs. And so we're going to try this. If it works and we like it, we'll continue doing this in the spring semester when we come back from winter break. So today we're going to explain and understand characteristics of the Great Depression. Okay, so you need to make sure that you have your notebooks. If you haven't already gotten those, go ahead and get those. On the next clean front page, you're going to create the cover page for, it says Unit 4 here. I apologize, that is a typographical error. It's Unit 5, and you're going to label it Unit 5, the Great Depression. Now, obviously, this will be the last unit that we cover this semester. When we come back from winter break, we will be covering World War II, but we're going to be working through the Great Depression over the next couple of weeks. Now, after you've created your cover page, go on to the next page and label the next page Introduction and Economic Issues of the Great Depression Notes. So today we're going to introduce the Great Depression. We're going to look at some of the characteristics, and we're going to look at some of the economic issues that are associated with the Great Depression. Because after all, it is going to largely be an economic issue that we're dealing with for this decade. So go ahead and prepare to take notes. Now remember, at any point during the lecture, you're in control. Feel free to pause the lecture, go back, give yourself enough time to write things down, go back and let me repeat things for you so that you understand them, and then you can progress as you need, according to your own speed. Okay, so the Great Depression. As with every era in U.S. history, or in history period, we have characteristics. And so the characteristics of the Great Depression, number one, it's a bust time. Now, thinking back to the 1920s, we said the 1920s were a boom time. And if you look at this in the context of the Permian Basin, sometimes we're in an oil boom and we have a lot of success and everybody's making money and lots of people are employed. But then again, sometimes we have a bust, an economic or an oil bust. And when this happens, companies start to lay people off. Maybe people aren't as maybe employment's a little higher than normal. People aren't making as much money. And that's exactly what's going on during the Great Depression. We've been through a period of unprecedented growth, lots of people making money, lots of people engaging in activities that will cause the Great Depression, but people had been, for the most part, making monies throughout the 1920s. Well, now that's going to come to an end. We have a severe economic vulnerability, and when we're vulnerable, we sort of leave ourselves open to somebody coming in and taking advantage of us. And so as we engage with other nations, we become very economically vulnerable. And this could be dangerous for us, and so it's going to be an issue that we're going to have to deal with moving forward through the 1930s. We have a significant changing role of the federal government. Prior to this time, the federal government had been very hands off. All throughout the Gilded Age, they got a little bit more involved in the Progressive era, but still by and large, they're a hands off group of people. And if you think about Warren G. Harding and Calvin Coolidge and Herbert Hoover, those three Republican presidents during the 1920s, they were very much laissez-faire individuals. Let the economy run itself. Don't get involved, because when government gets involved, then it's not going to really solve any problems. It's going to create more. And so when the Great Depression hits, it's really going to be a complete turnaround from this. We're going to need government intervention to step in and help the suffering that is occurring as a result of these economic issues. And so we'll see the federal government really change their role. Their role will expand. Their power will grow significantly during the 1930s and the 1940s. And so by and large, government becomes much larger during this time period. We'll look at some numbers a little bit later, but there's extremely high unemployment. When you have a great number of people in your economy that are unemployed, they're not paying taxes. They're not making money. They are going to become very reliant upon the government to help them out. And so it's going to be a strain on the government. It's going to be a strain on people. And when people don't make money, they can't pay for their houses. They can't pay for their loans. They can't pay for their cars and things like that. So we're going to see a lot of foreclosures, especially on farms out in the western areas of the United States. So there's going to be significant unemployment. There just aren't enough jobs to go around for everybody. Now, coupled with this Great Depression, we're actually going to see what's known as the Dust Bowl out in the western portions of the United States. Farmers had over-farmed. They had utilized some practices that were not the best types of practices to grow crops and things like that. And so we're going to start to see a drought that will occur because we do have a cycle of drought in the western states. All throughout time. And when this occurs, there's no rain. They've over-farmed, and now the wind is going to blow, and it's going to blow the topsoil away. And so you have these huge dust storms that are going to occur on a very large scale. If any of you remember back this past summer, we had what was called a haboob come through Big Spring and the Permian Basin. And it was this huge dust storm that in a span of about 15 minutes, first of all, you could see it rolling in from the west. And as it got closer and closer, the wind picked up and the dust was blowing. And in a span of about 15 minutes, it went from being daylight outside to essentially blotting out the sun. It went dark very quickly. We see dust storms all the time, but this was on a very large scale. Well, this is what was the norm in the western states in the U.S. during this time period. So not only do we have this bust time with a lot of economic issues, we're also having this issue with the climate. This climate cycle that is creating this dust bowl that is creating a lot of issues out in the West and for farmers and families. So let's look at the causes of the Great Depression. Why did it occur? Well, we talked in the last unit about significant stock market speculation, where we see people engaging in practices on the stock market. They gobble up a whole bunch of stocks of a company in hopes that those prices will go up, and they don't really have any facts that sort of back up the idea that it's going to go up. But they gobble up all of these stocks from these companies in hopes that the price will rise, and then when it does rise, they dump the stocks, they sell it, and they make a lot of money. Well, it creates artificially high prices in the stock market. And so we have this immense speculation in the stock market. Lots of people are engaging in this particular activity, and it doesn't create real wealth. It creates a very artificial, kind of gilded wealth. It's very gilded, looks like wealth on the surface, but when you dig down, these prices are not actually high. They are simply um, going up for a small period of time, and then the stocks are dumped and the prices are going to go down. So you've got this kind of economic wave going through the stock market. We know that we're going to have what is known as Black Tuesday on October 29th, 1929, when the stock market essentially crashes. And all this overabundance of speculation and investment into the stock market is going to come to a screeching halt. Now, as a result of Black Tuesday, we're going to see some significant bank failures. People are reliant upon banks. During the stock market speculation time period, people are going to go to the banks. They're going to borrow money to put into the stock market. And then when they make money back from the stock market, they pay off their loans, but then they are going to borrow more. And with the crash of the stock market, these banks are going to be owed a lot of money from these people who've been engaging in the stock market, and these people are not going to be able to pay it back. Well, other people are going to go to banks. They're going to become very scared because of the economic situation with the crash of the stock market, and they're going to go to the bank and they're going to start withdrawing money. Now, the way a bank works, when you go put your money in a bank, they don't go and put it in a vault and save it for you. What they do is they take the money, they put the amount of money that they owe you, that you have in the bank, in a ledger. They keep up with it, and then they lend money out. And when they lend money out, they utilize the money that we've put in the bank to loan to other people. And then when those people pay that money back, they pay it back with interest, so the bank makes money too. So when you go to the bank, yes, they're going to have money, but they're not going to have enough money on hand to pay every single person who has money in the bank. Right? And so if I have $1,000 and you have $1,000 and your neighbor has $1,000 in the bank, well, the bank's not going to have $3,000 on hand. They're going to have maybe $1,000 on hand because they've lent the other $2,000 out to other people in an effort to make money. And so that's why when you go to the bank, you can't just typically withdraw a huge amount of money from the bank. You've got to withdraw little bits at a time. When you have a bank account, they typically limit you from how much money you can take out of the bank each day. And so when the stock market begins to crash, people will start withdrawing money. They're going to take money out of the bank. And so when they go to the bank and start taking money out of the banks don't really have all the liquid money on hand to pay out. So the more withdrawals that are occurring, that's the less money they're going to have to lend. Now they've already lent out a whole lot of money, right? These people who have borrowed money to put into the stock market have lost all the money. Now they can't pay back the loans, right? And so the bank is going to start having significant issues. They don't have enough money to pay the people that they owe. The people that owe the banks can't pay them. We're having a significant issue here. And so when banks don't have enough money to lend, they're not making money. And when people are taking money out of the bank and not putting money into the bank, it's going to lead to bank failures. Banks will go out of business. And if you had $5,000 in the bank and you went to try to withdraw it and they didn't have it and then the bank went bankrupt, you're out of money. You're out of that $5,000. You've just lost your savings, right? And so this is going to become a big situation. This is going to be a big issue. Banks are going to start going out of business. They're going to start failing en masse on a large scale throughout the beginning of this Great Depression. We also have significantly high tariffs. Now, a tariff is a tax that we put on anything that is imported. And what this does is if we import a product from Great Britain and that product is cheaper than what you can buy in the United States, obviously we as consumers want to pay the lower price. We're going to buy the British product. So what the government does in order to force people to buy American products is they put very high tariffs or taxes on products that we import. So this product that we import from Great Britain, they're going to place a tax on it that makes it more expensive for you to buy than if you were to buy an American product. So it encourages and sort of forces people to buy products that are made in America. Now that doesn't seem like a very bad thing, but when you start putting high tariffs on things that we import from other nations, it's going to discourage other nations from doing business with us. We're very isolationist. And so those companies, those foreign countries like Great Britain are going to go start doing business with other countries. They're not going to invest in the United States. And when that happens, we're sort of just reliant upon our own economics. We're not diversified in others, so we don't have the other countries to sort of help us out. And so when we sort of retreat into ourselves this way economically, we're solely reliant upon our own economic well-being. And when we have the stock market speculation, we have Black Tuesday that will occur, well, now there's not enough money in the United States and we can't really rely upon ourselves. And so tariffs are taxes on imported goods, and foreign nations are not able to make payments to the United States. We may have lent some money to other countries. Well, now with these very high tariffs, they're not able to make any money as well. And so they're not able to pay us back the loans that they might owe us. And so we're not having that investment back into the United States from foreign nations. And so it's going to cause another angle of economic issue in this Great Depression. All these things are going to, come together to kind of put us into this Great Depression that we are going to see during the 1930s. So we know the causes. So now the effects of the Great Depression. Significant effects of the Great Depression. First of all, we're going to see significant government intervention in the economy. Okay, the government will begin to intervene. Okay, and this is a C here, but it should be an A because we're on a new topic. So A, government intervention in the economy. Okay. So this should be an A here. The government did not believe in really being a part of the economy. They did not like intervention. And remember, I've already mentioned that we have a very long history of a laissez-faire economy, especially during the 1920s. Warren G. Harding, Calvin Coolidge, President Hoover, Herbert Hoover, they all believed in laissez-faire. Just let it be. Let the economy regulate itself. The government should not be involved. And so they did not intervene much. Okay? When the Great Depression occurs, they feel like Herbert Hoover, who's president of the United States at the time, they feel like the economy will regulate itself. It will correct itself. We'll have a short-term pain, but eventually it's going to regulate itself and it's going to become better. And so they didn't intervene much, but they did pass a couple of things. Herbert Hoover will pass the Reconstruction Finance Corporation in 1932, which provided loans to large businesses. So even though they do get involved, the Republican Party is the party of big business. They're not helping the little people who are suffering. They're really helping the larger companies, the larger businesses that are suffering, because they feel like if these larger businesses go out of business, then it's going to have a domino effect and will eventually trickle down to all these little people. And so they passed this to try to provide loans to help these large businesses, in the idea that these large businesses will remain afloat and start employing other people, and it will bring down unemployment. All of these things don't really work. President Hoover is going to be very, very hands-off, and he doesn't intervene enough. And so when he runs for re-election in 1932, he will be soundly defeated by a guy named Franklin Roosevelt. And Roosevelt sounds familiar. His distant cousin was Theodore Roosevelt, who was the president during the early 1900s, during that Panama Canal time period. But he will be elected to the presidency in 1932. Now, Franklin Roosevelt, sometimes referred to as FDR by his initials, he is the first Democrat that is elected to presidential office since Wilson left office in 1921. So we're talking about an 11-year time period here where Republican policies have been in place. And so FDR is going to be the first Democrat that will be elected to office since 1921. FDR has a much more proactive approach in trying to stop the Great Depression. He feels like the government has to get involved, and the government is going to have to engage in some things that they haven't typically engaged in before in order to stop this hemorrhage of of economics here in the United States. And so he's going to be much more proactive in trying to stop the Depression. He will institute what is known as the New Deal. And when we move forward with this unit, we're going to be looking at the New Deal policies very in depth, because it is going to be this New Deal that will put us on the road to recovery. Now, Roosevelt's policies don't really pull us out of the Depression. He works to try to pull us out of the Depression, but it's really going to be World War II that gets us out of the Depression, because remember, war is really good for the economy. And when we go to war in 1941, we're going to need things to be produced for us to fight a war. And so factories start up and people go back to work, etc. But FDR tries. And he doesn't have a problem, if something fails, he doesn't have a problem throwing it out and trying something new. And if it fails, he'll throw it out and trying something new. He's very bold in his approach to trying to stop this Depression. Okay? So, not only do we have things like government intervention and a new president being elected. Again, sorry about this. This should be B. But another effect of the Great Depression is going to be unemployment. Obviously, as banks fail and as companies fail, people are not going to have jobs. And so we're going to see the unemployment rate in 1933 soar to 25%. Now, in America today, we have a pretty robust economy currently, and we have about a 4.8% unemployment rate. So in good times, we're somewhere between 3 and 5% unemployment. We see unemployment rise to 25%. That means 1/4 of all Americans who are trying to find a job cannot be employed because there are just not enough jobs to go around. When people don't have jobs, they obviously don't have money. And so this is going to become sort of a domino effect. If you have no money, you obviously cannot buy stuff, right? You can't provide for your family. You can't provide the basic necessities that you need, but you also can't buy some of the luxury things. There is no demand for things on the market. And if there is no demand for things on the market, companies have no reason to produce it. They have no reason to step in and create this supply. So when demand goes down, supply will go down as well, because they're only going to produce as much as being demanded, and not much is being demanded. And so when there's no reason to produce supply, they don't have a need for workers. They need fewer and fewer people to create fewer and fewer things to be sold, right? And so when there is no need for workers, we have layoffs. We have significant people being put out of jobs, being laid off, fired from their jobs. There's just not enough jobs to go around. And when you have a bunch of layoffs, people are unemployed, they're not going to be able to go buy stuff. So it's this vicious cycle of, no money to buy things, nobody can produce anything. It's this big vicious cycle in the economics situation in the United States. Now, one thing that it leads to is going to be significant hostility towards Mexican Americans. Mexican Americans had been necessary in the United States to work in a lot of the agricultural fields out west and in California and places like that, picking produce. Well, now these jobs are going to become very coveted. People are really going to like these or need these jobs. And so by and large, it's going to be Mexican Americans who hold these positions. And we're going to see some steps to sort of move these Mexican Americans out of these jobs to free them up for, quote, real Americans. And President Hoover will create a campaign, a policy called, quote, real jobs for real Americans. Now, some of these Mexican Americans are immigrants, but many of these Mexican Americans are American people of Mexican descent. So they've been here, they were born here, right? But because they look different and they have a different culture and they speak a different language sometimes, they're going to be seen as outsiders. We've seen this all throughout American history. We have seen this Americanization movement, this nativist movement where we don't particularly like, quote, outsiders. We want it to be very American. We want America for real Americans, right? And we've talked about that over and over. And so President Hoover will create this policy, real jobs for real Americans. And essentially, it's discrimination against Mexican American workers. So the white people are saying, we are suffering. We need these jobs. These jobs are being held by Mexican Americans or Mexican immigrants, and we need them to be out of these jobs so we can take them. And so that's essentially what this policy does. It eliminates the Mexican Americans and the Mexican immigrants who have been working in these positions so that it can free it up for, quote, real Americans, right? For white society. We've seen this happen before in history. We'll see it happen again. It's simply racism and discrimination against American workers. And so we'll start to see some local laws passed prohibiting the hiring of Mexican American individuals. And so a lot of these jobs out in California, especially, that had utilized Mexican Americans or Mexican immigrants to pick the fields and the orchards and things like that, they'll get rid of their Mexican workers and they'll hire, quote, Americans. They'll hire these white people. And so as farms start to fail in the Midwest, out in the western states, you're going to see a huge movement of people from the Great Plains region out to California in the 1930s so that they can go out there and work in these agricultural fields. If you've ever heard of or read or watched the movie called The Grapes of Wrath, it's a book written by a guy named John Steinbeck who wrote during the Great Depression, and it chronicles the movement of this family from Oklahoma to California and all the issues that they kind of dealt with in that movement out to California. And so California will get a significant bump in population during the 1930s because all these people who have nothing left for themselves out in Oklahoma and in the western states are going to be moving out to California to start working in these agricultural areas. This hostility towards Mexican Americans will also result in the deportation of over 1 million Mexican immigrants. So it's really this significant racism, nativism, and discrimination against this particular ethnic group in an effort to, quote, give these real jobs to, quote, real Americans. And so not only are we suffering as a nation, but we start to turn against one another as a nation. We're going to start to see things change significantly in regards to how we treat one another. And so it's essentially racism justified by misinformation. It's obviously wrong information regarding who these people are and what they are doing, but nevertheless it will occur. And it is another example of white society engaging in racism against a particular ethnic group. Okay, so we're going to stop here. Feel free to go back if you need something re-explained. That you can go back and listen to that, or you can certainly ask me if necessary to help clarify any information. And so this is our first foray into this type of activity, and so I'll be interested to see if it's something you guys like. Or if it's something that you perhaps don't like, but whatever the case, we'll see how it works out.